Hey guys, Prowl 1701 here, and here are 10 things I want to see in the next era of Doctor Who. So 2023, 2024, 2025, however long Ncuti Gat was in the role at least, here are 10 things that I want to see in the Russell T Davies 2 era of Doctor Who. And number one is, I want to see more pure historicals. I like the pure historicals of early Who. I know they weren't the most popular, but I enjoy them. And as much as Chibs messed it up, I like the idea that he tried to bring historicals back. Now, his weren't pure historicals. Some of them were close. There was always the not quite pure historicals, and oddly enough, that seems to be some of the parts of his run that people like. People seem to like his historicals, like the Witchfinders and Rosa and the Nikola Tesla episode. Some people really enjoyed those. So I'd love to see a pure historical really come back, where there's no alien influence. The Doctor just kind of is there while an historical event is happening, and he doesn't really alternate, he's just kind of there. Kind of like the Romans or the Reign of Terror. I'd really like to see that. I'm not even saying a lot, but I'd love to see like 2 or 3 episodes of that in maybe a 3-year period. That'd be nice. It would be good. I'd be curious to see how that would go over with people these days. Number 2 is I'd love the next companion to not be from modern day Earth. I am tired of all of the modern Who companions being from modern day Earth. Classic Who had companions from all sorts of different times. You had companions from the past like Jamie. Companions from the future like Zoe. You had, of course, present-day companions like Sarah and Jo and Liz. But then you also had like companions from another planet like Leela. Even though she's a human descendant, she's still from another planet. And she has that kind of savage warrior thing going on. You had Adric, who's from another universe. You had Nyssa, who was from Traken. And, we even had a Time Lady companion with Romana, a female Time Lord. 2 different versions of Romana. So I'd love to see Doctor Who branch out and have a companion from the past or a companion from the future. Because I love when the Doctor has a companion that can kind of keep up with him intelligent-wise, like Zoe could and like Liz Shaw could. I would enjoy that. Or just, a companion from another planet. I would enjoy that, a planet besides Earth. That way the first time they go to like modern-day Earth, she's walking around like, okay, this place is weird. I'd enjoy that. So just something besides a modern day companion, just to kind of shake it up and make it a little more like classic Who. Number 3 is no relationships between the Doctor and the companion. I'm old hat on. It's old hat at this point. I was not one of those people who was like against it when the 8th Doctor kissed Grace. I know like when the TV movie came out and the 8th Doctor and Grace kissed, some people were like, I was never like that. It wasn't that. I don't mind the Doctor occasionally having the relationship thing going, but it like happens all the time in classic Who now, to where when it doesn't happen and it's a platonic relationship, that's weird. You're like, wait, what? They're not into each other? So yeah, I just want them to be more like classic Who. Classic Who got by with 26 seasons with it. It's fine. One of them doesn't have to like the other. They can just be friends. That's what I want to see. Next on the list, number 4, is one companion. Just one. I don't need a TARDIS team, like a big team, like the 13th Doctor had. Because it's like they try to recreate that feel of the first Doctor era, but TV doesn't work like that anymore. TV back in the 60s was much slower paced. The format of the show was different, where you had the multiple episodes, so stories had room to breathe. Sometimes too much, you could argue. And I know for some people who are probably in their late teens, early 20s, 60s Doctor Who might move at a glacier's pace for them. But that's just how TV ran back then. I actually enjoy that pacing myself. Gives stories time to develop more. And the original 60s TARDIS teams could do multiple companions, and it worked. But now TV moves at a much faster pace. And the stories, especially unless they're 2 episodes, you have basically a 45-minute runtime. So you don't have time to develop the plot, develop the guest characters, develop the Doctor, and develop all of these multiple companions. And that's really something the Whittaker era struggled with, because you had 3 companions for her first 2 seasons, so you're trying to develop all of them. You're trying to develop the 13th Doctor, you're trying to develop guest characters, and you're trying to develop the stories, and in the case of Series 12, maybe even the seasonal arc. There's just too much going on. You need to thin that down. Just have the Doctor and 1 companion. The Doctor and 1 companion. So we can learn about that Doctor, that companion, and their friendship type of relationship with each other and how they get along and how they bond. That also gives more room for the story to breathe and for the guest characters to breathe. Number 5 on the list, rest the Daleks, the Cybermen, and the Master. They need a break. They need a break. I will at least give Chibnall this with Series 11. I don't like Series 11. It's my least favorite season of Doctor Who, but I love the fact it didn't have classic villains in it. Now, the villains it had in it weren't very interesting, to be fair. But I do like the fact he at least attempted to rest classic villains. The Daleks are just overused, the Cybermen are overused, the Master are overused, and while I will admit Chibnall did some good stuff with them, better than Moffat did in many ways, especially with the Cybermen and the Daleks, I feel like Doctor Who uses them as a crutch sometimes. And especially when they get beaten, especially Deus Machina beaten like they do so often. Even Power of the Daleks, as good as even Power of the Doctor, as good as it is, and I did enjoy it, did kind of Deus Machina the Daleks and the Cybermen, which I forgive because there's so much great stuff going on in that episode. So I'd really like them to take a break. Just shelve them for a bit. Not even just for a year, like for 3 years. Like, we need 3 seasons, at least 2 seasons, without any of them. They all need a break. Put them up. We'll circle back to this in a minute. If you are, though, I will say, if you are going to bring them back, don't Deus Machina them again. Like, if you're going to bring the Daleks back, just bring back 1 Dalek. Because you can make 1 Dalek threatening without having to Deus Machina it. I mean, you see this in the episode Dalek and in Resolution. It's far more scarier in tone because you only have to deal with 1. I mean, when you have an army of them, then you kind of have to Deus Machina it because the Daleks are so powerful. How can you stop a whole army of them otherwise? But when there's only 1, you can really explore how creepy and scary they can be without having to come up with a ridiculous resolution for it. Remember in Dalek when Christopher Eccleston's talking to Van Statten, he's like, what's the population of such and such? Well, it's such and such and such and such. All dead. They can do that? Yep. Why would they do that? Because it honestly believes they should die. You know, I like just the way Eccleston looks up. All dead. Dalek does a very good job of showing you just how deadly 1 Dalek can be. Resolution does a good job of that too, when it just totally waxes the army. So yeah, if you're going to do it, just bring back like 1. It's one of the reasons I like the lone Cyberman. He seemed intimidating without his army, even though he was kind of wasted in Power of the Doctor as well. And I definitely want to rest on the Master. We've got too much of the Master the past 2 eras. The next one on the list is bring back good horror to Doctor Who. You look at the popularity of like the Hinchcliffe era. It is held in such high regards by the fandom, especially, of course, us classic Who fans, because it's such a good era, such strong writing, a good Doctor, good companions, good script editing. And there's a reason for that, because horror lends itself very well to Doctor Who. You watch the Hinchcliffe era, especially like seasons 13 and 14 and stuff like Ark in Space, great horror. That gothic horror works really well. You look at episodes even in the modern show, like look at Stephen Moffat's Russell T Davies stuff, like the girl in the not necessarily the girl in the fireplace, although it has a couple creepy moments in it too. But you look at the Empty Child 2-parter. You look at Blink. You look at the Library 2-parter. You know, those are scary, creepy, atmospheric stories. Doctor Who lends itself to that very well. Even the God Complex and Night Terrors, while I don't like them, they're shot well enough. You still get the creepy vibe. Like when you see Amy get turned into the doll, but she's just turned away and you see her hair change. Creepy stuff. Creepy stuff. Doctor Who works well as that. Again, if you're going to use something like the Daleks or the Cybermen, you can do such a good horror aspect with them. Resolution has a nice touch of that, with the Dalek being able to puppeteer people, basically. It added a nice little edge to it. The Haunting of Villa Diodati has a little bit of a horror vibe to it, a suspenseful vibe where it's a bit creepy. You don't quite know what's going on, kind of like Ghostlight, where it's not like it might not be horror fang rock scary, but it still got that creepy, unsettling nature to it, which is what I mean by horror. Horror can encompass so many things. I like that creepiness. Doctor Who does that well. Bring that back. Next on the list is more non-modern day Earth locations. That's another thing. Doctor Who, the current Doctor ends up in the current year a lot. You know, the 10th Doctor was traveling around the mid to late 2000s a lot. Matt Smith was in the 2010s a lot. Jodie Whittaker's been in the early 2020s a lot. You know, it's a little weird. And you don't even have to go way out of your way. Like the next Doctor, have them in an episode when they're in like 2002. You know, that's not super far back, but it was still a different world. If you look at like 2001, 2002, things were very different than they are now. Facebook hadn't been started yet. There were no cell phones. Well, there were cell phones, but there were no iPhones. So while there were cell phones, like our whole life wasn't quite tied up into them yet. You know, the internet then wasn't what the internet is now. You know, 2001, the internet's still kind of a luxury item. So things are different. So just to have somebody running around in 2001 or 2 would be interesting. Or maybe you could even bump them slightly in the future and have them running around in like 2035. One of the things I liked about Dalek, the episode Dalek, was, you know, it comes out in like 2005, but it's set in like 2012, I think. So, which is weird to think about because that's like, you know, a decade ago now. But that was like 6 years in the future then. I like episodes where it's close like that. I'd love to see like 2035 or something, 2042. Just a little ahead to see how things would be different. But I'd love for them to go back into the past more. Like I said, I want more pure historicals. That would be great. Or even if they went into the future, like, you know, in 2273 or something, and they're on a colony or a spaceship. Or just other worlds. I would love to see human colonies on other planets. I'd like to see that more. I kind of want to get away from modern day Earth, because Doctor Who is a TV show where the basic premise is you can go anywhere in time and space. Anywhere. Lean into that. If you have that concept as the core part of your show, run with it. Take that concept and go anywhere in time and space with it. And I get they end up on modern day Earth a lot of reasons, for budget reasons. I get that. But I mean, say if I had a choice between a 13 episode count and a 10 episode count, but I'd get more non-Earth or non-present day Earth adventures with the 10 episode count, I might go with that. You know, just so I could have some different locations than, oh, look, this is taking place in 2023 or 2024, you know, whatever year the show is airing. So I'd love to see more locations and episodes not in modern day Earth. And let's see, I think that was number 8. Number 9 is create new iconic monsters. Again, we already talked about they need to shelve the Daleks, shelve the Cybermen, shelve the Master. If you're going to bring back a couple of classic villains, do ones you don't see too much. Like, you know, I think we're due to have the Autons back. I'd love to have the Autons back. Or bring the Ice Warriors back. You know, something like that. You know, have some fun with it and bring the Crotons back. But give them a bit of a redesign. Since they can form and break down, you could give them a redesign. I'd love to see the Crotons again. Or the Dominators, but give the Quarks an updated design as well. You know, I don't mind them bringing back the lesser-known classic Who villains. But I think really you need to create new iconic villains. Villains that are going to be remembered the way the Daleks are remembered or the Cybermen are remembered. Now, Modern Who has done a couple, like the Weeping Angels. If there's anything Modern Who has done that I think stands with like the Daleks, Cybermen, the Master, the Ice Warriors, etc., it's the Weeping Angels. They are kind of the Modern Who villain, I think, that is the, you know, kind of the standout of the creations. Now, they've been watered down a bit because, again, they've been used too often, sometimes just as glorified cameos. But they are an iconic villain. The Silence, I think, was a pretty good one. They did kind of turn out to be the Doctor's allies, and I think there's only so much you can do with that premise, but I will count them as, like, iconic villains. The Vashta Narada, but you'd have to work really hard to keep that interesting. It doesn't need to be a retread of the library when you need to do something different with it if you brought them back. So I really think you need to come up with new villains that, you know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, people are, you know, if they see them in an episode, they're like, oh, that's such and such. I love such and such. I remember when they first came out. You know, those ones that when people see them, they're like, oh, this episode's got such and such in it. I love such and such. So, instead of relying so much on the past, go with that. And that brings me to my next point, which is embrace the past and the future. Or remember the past, but embrace the future. I think one of the reasons I did love Power of the Doctor was how closely it ties in with Classic Who. I love Classic Doctor Who. I loved, spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about Power of the Doctor, but I'm sure you've seen it. I loved seeing all of the old Doctors back. Well, not all, but the old Doctors they could get back. I loved seeing them. I loved seeing Tegan and Ace. I loved that Tegan and Ace got to basically symbolically interact with their Doctors. That was beautiful. It had a lot of tinier little Easter eggs too that I enjoyed. And I love that kind of thing, but again, you can't do it all the time. And even like I said, the Daleks and the Cybermen, they need a rest. So I would love if in a story they brought back like a classic companion, like I'd love Joe in a story, or even lesser known ones. I still want to see Benton. Get John Levine back while you can. Have an episode where, and I know, canonically Benton isn't in the military anymore. I think it mentions in Maldron Undead, I believe, that he became a used car salesman. Somehow have him involved in a story. He just, him and the Doctor run into each other. And Benton helps him, because John Levine's great, and Benton's great. Little things like that, or maybe one of the other, Brigadier Bombera from Battlefield. I liked her. Bring her back. I'm cool with that. It doesn't even have to be like actual companions. You could just have somebody who was memorable in an episode come back. I would enjoy that. I'm trying to think of some more right off the top of my head. I'd love to see the episode where he actually meets King Arthur. Because, in Battlefield, they all recognize him as Merlin. I'd love to see that episode where he actually was Merlin for some. That would be cool, I want to see more of that. Again, that's touching into the past. But at the same time, you do have to kind of not use it as a crutch and you rely on the future. You could do the King Arthur thing, and a lot of the modern Who fans wouldn't even realize it ties into Battlefield. At the end of it, you could just have the king dying, and just have, like Ncuti Gatwa writing a note out. What are you doing? Writing a note for what? Myself. And then folding it into the helmet for later. And we know that leads into Battlefield, but they don't have to know that. That might actually encourage them to go back and watch Battlefield. I'd love to see that, but I really do want to see the show stand on its own feet and only occasionally do the nods to the past. I really want it to kind of chart its own course. I'll at least give Series 11 credit for attempting to do that. It does it badly, but it made the attempt, so I will give it some points for that. And finally, is have Stephen Moffat back to write at least one story for the next era. I'm not saying you have to have him back every season like he did in Russell's first era, although I'm cool with that too, but I'm saying at least get him back for one story, because Stephen Moffat is honestly one of the best writers I think the show has had, especially when he doesn't have the weight of Doctor Who and the weight of Sherlock and working on that 1010 movie. When he doesn't have all of these things on his shoulders at once, I really think that's what hurt his era of Doctor Who, and people have told me Sherlock as well, is that he was just juggling too many things at the time. Because I know he was also working on that 1010 movie, and I think everything just kind of suffered for it. But, my favorite Jodie Whittaker story is actually a short story he did during lockdown that Stephen Moffat wrote called Terror of the Umpty Ums. And many of y'all have heard me talk about it before. If there's ever a story in Doctor Who that gets the 13th Doctor right, where the 13th Doctor truly feels like the Doctor, where I'm reading it and I'm going, this is the Doctor, this is definitely the Doctor, this 13th Doctor is the Doctor, it's that short story. And again, if you're new to the channel and you've never heard me talk about it, you've never read it, you can actually look it up online. It's free to read. Again, it's just a little short story that came out during lockdown, and it's called Terror of the Umpty Ums. And it's awesome. It is awesome. And it shows Stephen Moffat still has it. He's written the 13th Doctor better than anyone, in my opinion. So I would love to have him come back when he can just focus on this story and let a story breathe and let it flow like it's supposed to. I think he would write a phenomenal story for Ncuti Gatwa. So I say that at least get Stephen Moffat to write one story in the next era. At least one. So those are 10 things I would like to see happen in the Russell T Davies 2 era. If I ever had his ear and was like, Russell, I got some ideas. Those are the ideas I would mention. I won't even say suggest because I don't want to presume that much, but I would mention them in his ear. And who knows, maybe he'd hear some of them and go, which would make my day. I just can't tell you how much it would make my day if Russell's like, and this Prowl guy had an idea too. I was like, hey, that would make my day. So, I would like to know what you think of this list and maybe some of the ideas you would have for the Russell T Davies 2 era. If you had some suggestions for him and you just happen to be sitting at a table next to him, what would you suggest? So comment down below and let me know, because I always enjoy hearing from you guys. Other things to do, click the like button and the subscribe button and the bell for notifications so you never miss out on another video. I also have a Patreon if you like what I do and would like to support what I do. That does help me pay the bills. There is a link to that down in the description below, so please take a second and check that out. I also want to give a shout out to 2 of my top tier patrons, Stephen and Colin. I appreciate their continued support as I do the support of all of my patrons. And I also have a P.O. box down there if there's anything you'd like to send me to look at and review. And a link to my Amazon wish list and a link to my Amazon UK wish list are both down there as well. Most importantly though, thank you for watching.